as a kid, I always looked at the Yankees as the evil empire. I think some people might say the Dodgers are now the evil empire with the way they spend money. But this used to be like before the Dodgers did what the Dodgers do now, and they spend their money very well, by the way. The Yankees were that team with, God rest his soul, George Steinbrenner. And they were the team that was never going to be outbid. And they were the team that was going to spend and spend and spend some more. Sometimes they didn't always spend their money wisely, but it was never a matter of money, right? They were always going to try to put their best foot forward to win. I think when you talk to people like Will Hill these days, he questions if that same mentality exists for the Yankees. What do you see from this iteration of the 2026 New York Yankees?
Well, no need to have sympathy for them. They right now have the third highest payroll in baseball. So just a tick under $326 million. Yeah, they're Hal Steinbrenner, it's one of the hysterical quotes I've ever seen. What do you mean you think we make money? You have a whole network. That's all they do is run Yankeeography. Come on. Okay. So here's really the nuts and bolts of the Yankees offseason. You've heard a lot if you've followed along. They're basically running it back as far as where the lineup is. And you're going to be waiting in earnest for the likes of Gerrit Cole and Carlos Rodón to join a rotation that actually, I think, got a nice little boost in acquiring Ryan Weathers, left-handed starter from the Miami Marlins in January. He will help back up Will Warren, Cam Schlittler, the phenom who broke out last year and was phenomenal in the postseason, and staff ace to start in Max Fried. Luis Gil will be your number 5 starter. So, Dave, that's a really damn good rotation to start. I think the back end of the bullpen, obviously for Yankee fans that watched with bated breath, it felt like this unit really struggled to get on track for most of the first half of the year. Now, I think David Bednar really settled things down for them, really taking the closer's role and running with it from, the All-Star break. No more Devin Williams, no more Luke Weaver. So you'll have basically Camilo Duvall and Fernando Cruz as your primary setup men. The Funk Man, Tim Hill, with a great mustache and every imaginable release point or arm angle you could envision will be your left-handed relief leverage arm. And then a couple of other guys that they're going to fill out for Aaron Boone's bullpen. Let's be honest, this is predicated on the number 1 home run hitting team, the number 1 scoring team, the number 1 OPS team last year. And so when you have that, Dave, it's hard to argue with changing things up wholesale from an offensive standpoint. So you give Trent Grisham the qualifying offer. He's back after a career year. He'll probably hit leadoff in front of Aaron Judge. Cody Bellinger, I think, was the huge addition or the huge re-signing because he does so many things, not only from a lineup perspective in the offense, but also the positional versatility, right? He can play first if you need to. He can play in the outfield if you need. I think we get a real good sense of what Ben Rice will be like. And I thought he was going to be the lion's share guy, but then you saw them bring back Paul Goldschmidt. So there'll be a platoon situation there when you have the left-handed and right-handed starters respectively. I think the biggest news is that Giancarlo Stanton said he has trouble opening a bag of chips. This is an injury that is going to be something to monitor because of how important he was, not only when he was healthy, but we know he is basically Superman in the postseason with what his offensive statistics are. So we'll keep an eye on him early in the campaign, Dave. That's a big bat that they need to have. I'll start with my questions with you on the back end of this lineup. And I asked this about a lot of American League teams. Is this a pennant-winning lineup with Jazz Chisholm Jr. as your second baseman, with Ryan McMahon as your third baseman? Anthony Volpe is going to be on the injured list to start the year. So if all indications are it's Jose Caballero that will get the start at shortstop. And then Austin Wells, who's very serviceable and obviously has had his moments. Remember, he was just a year or so ago hitting in cleanup spots in Aaron Boone's order. So that's a nice little 9-hole bat to have. In your mind, can you back this lineup when healthy? Is this a pennant-winning lineup on paper for you?
And that's where the questions arise for me. You mentioned it at first and at short and at third, whether or not McMahon's going to hit enough, Volpe's going to hit enough. And look, Volpe is, I almost feel for him, right? He's kind of the butt of the jokes when it comes to the Yankees. And if they have anything goes wrong, it's normally going to be an Anthony Volpe joke that's inserted there. The guy was hurt last year, right? Like, I think we have to be honest about this. And as you mentioned, he's going to start off the year on the injured list this year. So while he might be the bane of the existence here for the Yankee fans when they're trying to, put needles in the donkey here on the voodoo doll and make somebody the donkey, and they keep doing that to Anthony Volpe, I want to give the guy a fair shake. So I do kind of look at Rice, Volpe, and McMahon and say 2 corner positions where you normally have to get power. You mentioned Goldie for Paul Goldschmidt to maybe play platoon there with Rice. Like, you got to get some power out of your corner positions here on first and third base. And if Volpe is healthy, can we expect him to hit this year? Because we always talk about it, Jensen, you do too. Ever since you lost Juan Soto and he goes to the Metropolitans and you lose that protection, that real protection for Judge, I just go, why would you pitch to Judge if the bottom half of that lineup that we're talking about, you just don't think that there's enough protection past Judge necessarily when you get to 5, 6, 7 and so far down the line. It's not a lineup that I sit here in fear of today if I'm an opposing pitcher. So the one guy that I'm terrified of is Aaron Judge. I just don't know why in a leveraged situation I would ever pitch to him with the rest of this lineup the way it is.
Well, that's the reason why I think they bring Bellinger back. He was so good for them in that spot, and that's why that I think he was so critical to their success. Now, a couple of guys and youngsters that I think we might see maybe sooner than later, Dave, and he's having a great start to his spring training, is George Lombard Jr., middle infielder. You mentioned the shortstop position. If Caballero doesn't get off to a great start and Lombard does down at AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre, you could have a youngster that comes up. He is the number 32 overall prospect in baseball, but you could make the argument that right now he is the top prospect for the New York Yankees. Another couple of guys to keep your eye on, not only throughout the year, but also in spring training. Carlos Agrange, this is you thought Cam Schlittler had absolute fury from the right side. This dude has absolute petrol. An unbelievable young fireballer arm that I think will find his way, depending on what the injury situations are for the Yankees staff. He could be a guy sooner than later, much in the way that Schlittler was. You mentioned Aaron Judge and the fear factor. They have a kid in Spencer Jones, former Vanderbilt Commodore, who has had issues with swing and miss the last couple of years. A big reason why he hasn't been called up. But you've also heard him be talked about in like, hey, if you were to trade for Paul Skeens, the Pirates would want Spencer Jones, and there's a reason why. Well, if you've watched his spring training so far this year, Dave, it feels like he's got some things ironed out, and that is great news for reinforcements on the youth side. We mentioned the payroll off the top, and with the impending lockout likely after this year, what will that do to certain teams at the top here? I'm anxious to see what some of the youth in the upper levels of the minor leagues will do here, but as I wrote in our betting guide, Dave, the goal never changes, World Series or bust, and Aaron Boone will rely on the offensive firepower to win games before Gerrit Cole and Carlos Rodón can return. If the bullpen gets off to a better start and those guys get healthy in the rotation, my bold take for New York was that the rotation reinforcements will prove vital as they will find their way back to the American League Championship Series. I think it could be the Yankees and the Mariners for the right to represent the junior circuit in the 2026 World Series.
AL pennant to win that and get to the World Series is plus 450. To win the World Series is 10-1. And I think if you're a Yankee backer, and if I've got concerns about the bottom of the order here, and the middle of the order is going to be okay with the protection there for Judge, then you would think they would spend at the deadline with the lockout looming to get the help that they would need at the bottom of that lineup to be able to turn it over to the top. So you just can't pitch around Judge and or Bellinger in key spots there. So very fascinating if help is on the way there from the kids.